Hey everyone, this is Sol with another video, and today I'm going to go over the Q&A that had just went down with Ian Hazzikostas and good old Josh Allen. It was fun. Just like the previous Q&A reactionary videos, I'm going to read off the questions, I'm going to give my answers and some additional thoughts and reactions to it. This is more or less audio, so unless you want to read along and look at the questions, which I'm going to have up on screen, feel free to, well, click anywhere else and do whatever it is that you do, because, well, here we go. The Q&A started off not with so much a question, but more like an apology. Ian Hazzikostas, first of his name, went out to explain without so much as really giving an excuse as to what was going on. One of the more fundamental things that was going on early on with the patch release over on the North American side was, well, servers weren't working. As you know, authentication servers weren't working and basically people couldn't get on. Ian explained the server problem in not so technical detail, but in detail enough that my feeble brain was able to understand it. So unfortunately the communities feature was not up for the first couple of days of the expansion, but as of this recording, my community is still working and I'm gonna have a link below that you can join it. Hey! But it wasn't just communities and the server problems that were plaguing the patch. Even after the realms became stable, a lot of complaints were coming in with different kinds of bug reports, poor experiences, almost across the board. Ian's explanation and apology, I want to say that it's enough. I do like that he explicitly said that he's not giving excuses. He's not trying to sweep anything under the rug or say that anything is okay. They are as dissatisfied with the patch release as we are. We can go on and on to talk about the Blizzard conspiracy, how Activision is ruining everything and that they rushed the patch, and give off all these other explanations, but I think it's really just what it is. Blizzard messed up. They admitted it, they want to try to do better and move on, even though we've heard that before, just as they said. So if anything, Ian did cover his bases. It's pretty good. It's almost like he should be a lawyer someday. I don't know. So let's get off to the questions, alright? Why can't I use Mage Tower appearances on my second monk when I've completed them on my first? So I'm not sure if this was a question that came out of a misunderstanding or not. According to Ian, it is likely that that particular player was trying to transmog their artifact weapon, when in fact they should have been trying to transmog a normal, good old non-artifact weapon. With that said, and this alludes to a later question that I'll talk about in this video, it does kind of suck that with regards to artifact transmogs that have to do with both a weapon and an offhand, at least in the case of my protection paladin, if I wanted to transmog to like the flail that I have for my Mage Tower appearance, I'm gonna get both the flail and the shield that came with it, and I don't like the look of the shield. Unfortunately, I'm gonna be stuck with using both. I have to use either both or none, which kinda sucks. When will Warlocks get their new caster animations? They are the only class who don't have the new spell animations or the spell idle animation. Their answer was basically soon, you know, soon, whatever. I mean, never mind the fact that they have like some cool spell animations, the new Chaos Bolt, the new Lock Closet. So don't worry your heads off, fellow Warlocks. Your time will come soon. So the bonus for doing random dungeons has been changed to a weekly bonus. Why has Blizzard decided to heavily nerf running random dungeons even more when questing is already faster unless you are a tank or a healer? This is... I can't help but nitpick this one, but these are the kinds of questions where they're not really questions, they're more like assertions and then follow-ups based on those assertions. So Ian immediately came out to say, this is a bug. This is not intended. They still intend to have a daily bonus for every, you know, for your first heroic of the day. Whatever's there right now, and I haven't seen it myself, it's a typo or it's unintended and they plan on fixing it. If it's actually mechanically only working as a daily bonus, then they're definitely going to fix it. It's a little bit hard to gauge at the moment because we're only on the third-ish day of the patch. So maybe people have been able to test this out and give their own testimony as to what their experience was, but that is clearly not what Blizzard wants it to be. Legacy loot was recently changed to be listed as more than 10 levels instead of 10 or more. Any reason for this change? Any chance of it going back? This currently extremely restricts previous expansion transmog hunting. Unfortunately for people like me who love farming for transmog, Blizzard is clarifying once and for all what this whole legacy loot mode system thing is going to be about. Legacy loot mode, as in you're going to get a full allotment of loot as if you were in a full raid team, is only going to apply from the second most previous expansion. In the case of the Battle for Azeroth expansion that's coming out, that means Legacy Loot Mode is going to apply to Warlords of Draenor and not to Legion. Legion will get a Legacy Loot Mode as soon as we are in the expansion after the Battle for Azeroth. I'd like to say that it kind of sucks. It does make it that much more difficult for solo warriors to go in and very easily blow through a raid, and otherwise get a whole bunch of loot. With that said though, it's not like being able to farm for transmog is impossible. You just have to do that thing where you call on other people, like humans, and tell them, hey, I would like you to come with me to do this stuff, and you're plate and I'm cloth, so let's do this together as a team. I know that I'm being a little facetious here, but like I said, it's not like we're being prevented from farming for transmog at all. You just gotta kind of do it the old-fashioned way. My hope is that there will be a cool community, hint hint, that is going to be focused mostly on transmog stuff. Mixed teams of different armor and weapon types will all get together in this cool little community and farm for stuff. I think that can be a thing as long as people want it to be, but for people that want to solo that sort of stuff, well, this is what we get. What is the meaning behind Azerite armor and mythic raid mounts being untradeable while on personal loot? Is this a bug or intended? So with regards to mythic raid mounts, you can trade those things now, even though it's on personal loot. It was a bug, they fixed it, there we go. The reasoning about Azerite armor, and just to clarify, if Azerite armor drops for you, for example, you're not able to trade it regardless. And the reasoning behind it, it's not a very good reason that I like. I mean, Ian was being kind of wordy about it, but ultimately he said, with regards to Azerite armor, they're going to get theirs, you're going to get yours, it's all going to work out. And I don't find that very satisfactory. Part of the challenges that Ian was describing was with trying to translate between players why Azerite armor might be good for them as opposed to yourself, as opposed to someone else. As you know, Azerite armor treats itself differently depending on who picks it up. The Azerite armor for a monk is going to be very different for a druid, is going to be very different from a paladin. They all have very different power sets. So the confusion that Ian's arguing is that person A who received this piece of armor and person B who wants it, how are they going to tell each other, yes, it's going to be much better for me? And this is apart from, of course, item level, which Ian does acknowledge. In the end though, and I'm going to purposefully exaggerate on this is one of those cases that I don't like, where the game is trying to play itself for me. I do believe that Ian's right, that there's going to be confusion among players that are trying to wager or to bargain themselves into getting a certain piece of armor or to give away a certain piece of armor because they're going to argue that it's better for them. But just like how I'm not a big fan of the forced personal loot system, I am a fan of having some social structure. I do like the agency of having two human beings being able to interact and trade stuff with each other as opposed to being at the mercy of a system. This does seem to be a significant enough concern for Blizzard to go through with this, to have even in the case of Azerite armor, to not allow trading to happen. So we're just gonna have to see how this works out. I love the Mythic Dungeon Invitational, but most teams ran similar comps: Blood DK, Holy Paladin, Arresto Druid, and a subset of the same 5 or 6 DPS specs. What changes are you making to encourage more variety at the highest levels? Most of this answer relates to the Mythic Dungeon Invitational itself, and it doesn't necessarily translate to how things are in-game. The concern though here was that there was, for the most part, a single best tank, a single best healer, a single best DPS comp. Unfortunately, Ian didn't go as far as to talk about what specific changes are going to be happening to the classes to prevent something like this from happening. Because when you're at this level of play, as in the competitive level, you're going to take advantage of certain things that normal players don't really take advantage of. There are systems and changes that are happening in the battle for Azeroth that should prevent something like this from happening again. This mostly includes the idea of artifact weapons and their relative power. As you may or may not know, weapons are going to be more or less stat sticks, and not so much a very forward-facing, very strong element to a character's power. Going back to the MDI itself, something that was interesting is that Blizzard allowed competing teams to pick the kinds of affixes that they had to deal with. That kind of skewed things over to choosing the easiest affixes to work with, and from there going with the comp that works with those. So there are a number of elements in place that are going to take place both in-game and at the competitive level that are going to change in order to resolve the things that are being addressed in this question. Will Mythic Plus seasons last until the next major patch, or will the 8.5 patches see a new affix? The idea here is to have a grand seasonal launch. It's going to be both the Mythic Plus season, the PvP season, as well as the raid tier that all happen at the same time. I think that's great, to have 3 major pillars of WoW gameplay all launch at the same time, so it's like all these dogs just waiting at the gate ready to get let out. You mentioned in another Q&A that class development would be put to a later date after the expansion launches. Can you tell us when that will be? So the answer to this was a little vague, and for the most part, this is standard Blizzard fare. So this is what's going to happen with the classes that received less attention up until launch, as well as all the other classes. Unfortunately, when it comes to client-side major changes, like changes to rotations and abilities and things like that, those do involve a patch, so we would need to wait for 8.1. In the meantime, though, there's going to be various band-aids that are going to be applied, starting from now all the way up until launch and up until 8.1. By this, we're talking about hotfixes, changes to numbers and variables in already existing and complete abilities, as well as Azerite traits. As we get closer to raid time, we still probably won't get a sort of client-side, like an 8.0.5 patch. I kind of doubt that's going to happen. For all we know, it might, and maybe those classes need that much help, but otherwise, it's not going to be elegant, it's not going to be clean or all that fun, but Blizzard is just going to try to make the numbers work as best as they can during that tier. So I guess the answer to the when part of this question is that it's ongoing. It's going on like all the time. It's just a matter of, is there going to be a major change? It's really not going to be until 8.1. As a Horde player, I find myself with little reason to hate the Alliance or take pride in the Horde right now. Is this an intended phase 1 for future twists and turns? I'm not surprised that this question was asked to quell some of the feeling among the audience about the feelings towards the faction conflict as it is right now. Ian didn't spoil anything other than to just say, stay tuned. I admit it's hard. There are players that chose to be the Horde because they felt that they wanted the feeling of being, both savage and honorable at the same time. Right now, under the current regime, they don't feel that way. Because this isn't just a story that we watch on TV, we virtually align ourselves with these factions, and when these factions do something that goes against what we feel as people and as players, it doesn't make us feel very good. As a self-proclaimed fan, or a Horde cuck, as I like to call myself, all I can say is that, at least at the moment, we gotta weather the storm. The Battle for Azeroth, and I hate analogies, but the Battle for Azeroth is a book where the pages turn ever so slowly. Patience is encouraged, and like Ian said, don't lose heart. The Alliance is going to screw up at some point. Any plans for a solution to not have a stat squish every other expansion? No, they don't. Or at least according to them, they haven't thought of something elegant enough yet. They did acknowledge that as it is right now, it is very inelegant, it is kind of a mess. But as for turning damage and stats into like, I don't know, scientific notation like mega damage or turning them into percentages, like they just haven't thought of anything cool yet. Will we see fixes to the recent stat squish, seeing that it has created massive imbalance with current and legacy content? This is part of the grand, hey, we Blizzard screwed up when it came to the squish. Blizzard's intention here is to return things to relative normalcy, where you're still one-shotting old content just the way you usually did, and that during the leveling process that the things that are one-shotting you or are unkillable or otherwise just unpleasant, well, those are things that you should just be bugging and reporting to Blizzard, because I don't know if we should believe them or not, but we'll just take their word for it that they are fixing bugs on the daily. There's been a lot of talk on Reddit and forums about a level squish. What are your thoughts on it, and have you considered it? To my surprise, they have in fact considered it, and they also considered it extremely daunting. Now, think of the solution and the intention here. So the solution is to have a level squish, and this is to address problems with the leveling process. How new players feel overwhelmed that they have to gain 120 freaking levels in order to play with their friends. That's a lot of expansions, even with the 7.3.5 patch having effectively knocked off a couple of expansions from the whole leveling belt. The question that Ian alludes to with the challenge of doing a whole level squish is it worth it? We've seen what happens with the periodic stat squish. It's a bit of awkwardness that happens for a couple of days, maybe even weeks, where things have to be ironed out and fixed. After that, though, there is a sense of relative normalcy. There's still some bugs and maybe some bad feelings out there, but for the most part, it's going to be addressed. Regarding a level squish, just as Ian was explaining, this is taking 14 years worth of WoW and messing with it in very fundamental ways. This goes back to the previous question of the item level squish, which I didn't talk too much about, but how do you translate that much worth of gameplay and still make the power differences between one expansion and the other, one raid difficulty to another still feel relevant. So they have considered it, but they also considered it to be a bit too monumental of a task as opposed to working on like newer content. And even on top of that, let's pretend that WoW still lasts for another 10-15 years. That means we're gonna have to do another level Squish. So we may potentially have to mess with what could have been 180 levels worth of content and squish that again? Is that going to be the expectation? I don't have a great answer to that, but my quick foot in the mouth answer would be, dude, that's too hard. No, it's not worth it. Is the new camera anchor overlooking our character in game an intended change? So I took a look at this in game and I noticed that when I'm zooming into a gnome or a goblin that you just kind of coast in and you zoom in and then you just kind of dip a little bit. I don't know, it's just kind of a weird little camera quirk. As someone who doesn't play a gnome or a goblin very much, I wasn't quite sure what I was looking for there. Will we be able to say goodbye to Hati as hunters? Would be nice to maybe tame her as a normal pet, and if not, at least say goodbye. So Ian alluded to the idea that maybe we won't entirely say goodbye to Hati. I think that's cool for hunters, as well as other classes who have had weapons and such that talk to them. At the same time, though, I think of the classes as a whole, like, I'm a protection paladin, I'm the High Lord of the Silver Hand, and yet it's not being acknowledged at all. I'm just another little horde cuck following my war chief's orders, and like, that's it. I really would have liked to have seen a goodbye to our order hall, like, you know, a stepping down sort of quick little thing, but can't have everything, I suppose. Are we going to continue using the artifact fishing pole in Battle for Azeroth? Will the traits be updated to reflect BFA fishing nodes? Unfortunately, no. You're not going to be able to use it for much more than a fishing pole, and that's it. It's been a while since I've tested it, but when I tried to use that one ability, which I forgot the name of it, but it didn't teleport me to any nodes. Fortunately, there is going to be a fish that you can find in the Battle for Azeroth that does work the same way, if you care about the whole teleport aspect of it. Is it intended or a bug that using artifacts for transmog forces that artifact appearance in both hands? Unfortunately, yes. It's not clear just how high of a priority Blizzard is going to make with, like I was saying earlier in the video, how I want to use the flail but not the shield, or some people want to use the shield but not the sword or the hammer or flail that is linked to it. This goes the same way for druids who want to have the werebear form, but they don't want to necessarily use the weapon that's tied to it. They'd rather use something else. Unfortunately, for now, that's not going to be a thing. Speaking of druids though, Ian did allude to the idea that maybe there are going to be new druid forms in the future that can be unlocked just because, well, they might be cool. Why are the Feral and Guardian artifact skins tied to transmog instead of a separate tab? We're now forced to use the daggers and fist weapons. They were bearable in Legion because we could transmog over them, but in BFA we are forced to use the defaults. That was pretty much linked to the previous question. Those transmog rules are just simply the rules for right now. The time may come where there can be a quality of life solution where I can use whatever the heck weapons I want, and druids can be able to change into their forms, but still wear the weapon that they feel like. It only appears that at the moment, it's not a high priority thing. So we'll just have to wait and see. Can we expect any changes to transmog possibilities, like being able to mog two-hander weapons to one-handers, two-handers into fist weapons, and so on? Ian put particular focus on fist weapons, that he wants to focus on those being a little bit more adaptable, although he didn't specify exactly how to go about that. As for the other stuff though, for the most part, no, not really gonna happen. It's not so much being able to swap out the weapon, but with the weapon comes the weapon animations, and something like that may not translate very well depending on the class and weapon combination that you wanted to use. I'm kind of okay with that. I'm a little worried that weapons would get a little bit too comical if, like, I was able to use Armageddon as a protection paladin, or if instead of a shield I were to wear something else that would go on my offhand. So something like that, I think there is a certain line that Blizzard draws, and this would be one of those lines that they just don't want to cross. Will we see more gameplay altering / defining Azerite traits soon? The loss of legendaries, set bonuses, and artifacts does not seem to have been replaced. Most traits seem relatively passive. This is one of those ongoing debates that you folks at home and on the toilet and me will continue to debate and talk about for many, many months to come. I am in agreement with Ian when I say They ain't that passive. The other week, my wife and I created a spreadsheet that involved just paladins, just paladin traits and how to work those onto a spreadsheet so we can kind of map out what sort of gearing path that I wanted to go down. From it, I learned that there are a ton of different traits, Azerite traits for one, and two, many of them are in fact gameplay altering. They are at the relative level of 2-piece or 4-piece set bonuses that redefine gameplay that would make me behave a little bit differently. But there are very passive ones too that I can choose to take if I wanted to, like if I just wanted to, on proc, little pets come out and start biting someone's ankles, or if I just get a very passive stat boost. Those are things that I can choose if I wanted to. Or I can choose the one that effectively makes me, a paladin, have like a stampeding roar that's only on a 40-second cooldown. That's not bad. The second part of Ian's answer, let me just go with what Ian said, is that consider that the first tier of raid content usually has pretty lackluster kinds of 2-piece or 4-piece set bonuses. This is pretty much the same difference that we're seeing here, except with Azerite traits. I know that that's more of a non-answer than anything. I'm basically telling you, hey, just wait for the next tier, you might see something cool. But more literally what I'm saying is that this is in line with what is considered the first tier of raid content, that maybe the traits aren't as exciting. However, with a new raid or a new dungeon, if there are going to be more dungeons in the Battle for Azeroth over time, we are going to see more traits, more combinations, more to deepen the meta. What are Blizzard's thoughts and plans on developing classes in BFA and the future? We don't get a new talent row past level 100, and Azerite traits seem lackluster. Bloat is a looming issue, but people want new toys and flavor too. This one is probably the most exciting question that was asked here, because the answer, it pretty much solidified what Blizzard's foundation or paradigm, or basically the design of how they want to develop future WoW expansions. And to say it in so few words, they want to make each expansion's experience modular. And by that, I'm talking about what we've seen with artifacts and what we're going to see with Azerite traits or Azerite Gear, that when we're done with this expansion, artifacts, say goodbye. Azerite Gear, say goodbye. We're going to be moving on to something new. This is something that's going to be debatable until the end of WoW, and it's going to be studied in game design classes or something like that. Maybe, I don't know. What I mean by that is that when I joked about, hey, we got a new system that you're going to also say goodbye to, that's real. That's going to happen. And maybe I'm fine with that, and maybe I'm not. The crazy thing about the world of Warcraft is that it's been around for a really long time, and it's still running, and it's still developing at the scope and scale that it has been for the past 14-ish years. It's a game that turned from adding things in each new expansion to reinventing itself a little bit in each expansion. It results in what Blizzard aims for as refreshing gameplay. Things feel new, things feel a little bit different. There's a reason for me to try out a new class, a new spec. My protection paladin that I've been playing for years and years, it's not going to feel stagnant. I mean, imagine if I was still popping Holy Shield every couple of seconds like I was in Burning Crusade. Maybe I'd still be fine with it. I probably wouldn't be, but for the most part, I get behind players when they complain about, hey, at least give us a new, talent row or something like that. So I'm thinking at a more game design / philosophical level, but just hear me out for another minute. But I'm wondering if there can be a kind of timeless system that can keep a player, at least when it comes to their talents or abilities or whatnot, that they can hold on to something that they know that they could always draw on if they wanted to. So let's say, for example, they did introduce a talent row, but it's not just a simple talent row, but it's a single selection. And from this selection, you can choose between a litany of abilities that we've seen in previous expansions or something like that. Just kind of a legacy trait or ability that we can always call on. I don't know, maybe that's totally the wrong way to approach it, but I think I feel it with players when they feel like the game changes way too much for them. I would love to see a unifying thing that doesn't really change from expansion to expansion. It can grow a little bit, but for the most part it doesn't change. And to be honest, I know that this is coming out of left field, but this is where I would really like to have player housing. I know it's not gameplay related or even related to this very question at all, but I would just like to have something that ties a player down. that can give a player a reminder that despite everything that they went through from vanilla to Burning Crusade and all the other expansions, that there is something that they can go back to that can just tie them back to who they are and who they've always been. Anyway, that's a big tangent. Let's move on. The Mage Tower challenges in Legion were awesome and really fun to work towards with great rewards. Would you consider introducing this sort of solo challenge again in BFA? This is probably the best last question that I've seen in a while, because the answer is yes. They do want to have some sort of, solo challenge tough content thing in the Battle for Azeroth. I can kind of recall many moons ago now when it was either Ian or it was someone else who had said that no, they don't plan on having solo challenges such as the Mage Tower or like the Chromie scenario or the Withered Training scenario. The fact that Ian said that yes, they want to do something like this again is testament to all the little things that I've been seeing on Twitter and on forums about, hey, I got my challenge done, I feel so good about myself, because completing the Mage Tower is definitely one of my favorite things that I've ever done in Legion and in WoW, I guess. The idea of completing that challenge, whether it's relevant or whether you're collecting all of them for all of your characters and all of your specs, is something, like I said, something to celebrate, and the idea that Ian wants to keep that in there is very cool. He still messed up on the patch launch, but good answer on this one. So that wraps up all the questions and answers and my reactions. So what did you think of this Q&A? I thought that was the standard fare, plus a fairly detailed and fairly wordy apology, a couple of revelations, some more disappointments, and one little bright spot at the very end. Thanks for watching, and if I've looked sleepy, it's because I ate right before doing this recording, so fighting the food coma right now. I hope this recording was something that you enjoyed, so if so, please hit that like button and subscribe to support me so I can keep giving you more of this and all things Warcraft. I'll see you next time. Until then, stay safe, stay happy, and stay breezy.